So in the last lesson, you just saw me utilize the skin cage system for the skinning of the tail. I will more than likely also use this approach for the headphones and the sunglasses. But as I mentioned in one of the previous lessons, when it comes to the skinning of the main rig, I will be going with a traditional skinning approach. As I showcased with the tail, the skin cage system for advanced skeleton is an amazing skinning tool. It does a particularly good job containing the influence of joints to the expected range. And it also comes with the really nice guide system to facilitate the skinning process. But I want to take a different approach with the main rig only because I want to use the dual quaternion method of skinning for this model. And I don't know how to set up the skin cage to use that by default. The main reason I opt to use dual quaternion method of skinning is because it has done an amazing job preserving volume for my rigs in the past. Advanced Skeleton skin cage system has a skin slider system that is intended to hold volume for the rig, but as I have displayed in a previous lesson, it is a system that can make you end up with a very messy rig. I will probably put in a ticket for this to see if the skin cage system can allow you to pick between various skinning options. It would be great if I can use the skin cage with the dual quaternion method of skinning, and so that I can opt out of using the skin sliders. So now I want to give a brief overview of my corrective deformation plan before I move along with the skinning process. Once the skinning is done and we run through the advanced skeleton face fitting, building, and troubleshooting process, it will be time to delve into the corrective deformation work. And I must admit, the development and proper triggering of corrective deformations is going to make up a huge portion of this course. Our bodies have so many superficial reactions to movement of muscle, bones, tendon, fat, blood, and veins. Even if we focused our attention on muscle, bones, and tendons, there is no way we can get all these superficial reactions in our 3D rigs. There is also no reason for a 3D rig to try to do so. The more hyper-realistic you want your results to be, the more corrective deformation you do. For this project, I'm dealing with a stylized character intended for use in film projects. And even though I want a fair amount of corrective deformation, I'm going to have to decide what I want more and less of. When it comes to corrective deformation, there are a few options that we have at our disposal. The cheapest and most preferred option is to use corrective joints and a driving system. Advanced Skeleton offers a few ways to do this. You can utilize corrective joints at the skin cage stage with what Advanced Skeleton calls skin sliders, which we have discussed previously. And you can also opt to use Advanced Skeleton's custom control options further down the line after you have completed your rig. A second option is to use corrective sculpt deformers. Corrective sculpt deformers are a lot more expensive than corrective joints as far as viewport feedback is concerned, or just as far as efficient rigging is concerned. But corrective sculpt deformers offer a more persistent volume preservation solution for about the same amount of work, depending on the manner in which you use the sculpt deformer. A third option is to use corrective blend shapes. Corrective blend shapes allow for more detailed sculpting of corrective anatomy. It's much easier to use Y.E.S sculpting tools to achieve a specific corrective deformation result than to use a network of corrective joints or corrective sculpt deformers to simulate a sculpting workflow. So if, for instance, I wanted to design what a knee would do when a character crouches, if I was using sculpt deformers or corrective joints, I'd need several different joints to be impacting the various areas that I want to sculpt on the knee to get a successful result. But with blend shapes, I would just go in there and sculpt the vertices to look exactly the way I need them to look, and that's all I would have to do. So it's a significantly simpler sculpting process, and that would obviously mean it's best to use that when you have very specific goals for what the deformation should look like. If it's more complex than just a simple bulge or protrusion, you should probably use corrective blend shapes. These three options for corrective sculpt deformation can also be utilized together in interesting ways to get the best of all three options. I may be doing some of this mixing of the available options in this course. Corrective deformers can also act as real-time sculpting controls at animation time if utilized with a control system. Advanced Skeleton offers you this option to manually trigger corrective deformers with the help of a controller. To extend manual control to myself and other animators of this rig, I will be setting up controls to allow for the manual triggering of the corrective blend shapes and sculpt deformers that I set up in this course. So as I stated at the beginning of this course, the job of this rig is only to resolve anatomically sound deformation. This rig will not have to worry about rigging of clothes and other complex appendages, so the extra expense of a sculpt deformer is excusable. Also, as I mentioned before, this is a film asset, so this is perfectly okay. If it was a game asset, the best option would be to rely exclusively on joint-driven corrective deformations, which Advanced Skeleton offers by default with a comprehensive set of tools for their development. And I think for game characters too, blend shapes are sometimes favored. But nowadays, when I see a lot of game characters, what is being used is corrective joint deformation. All right, so I created this table over here to compare the pros and cons of the three corrective deformation approaches that I will be utilizing in this course. So in the first column, I have Advanced Skeleton's custom controls, which is a corrective joint solution. And it is the cheapest solution, which is why it's the most preferred solution for game characters. Then you have blend shapes, which I believe is the median expensive. It's in the middle. It's not as cheap as the corrective joint solution. And then the most expensive are the Y.E.S sculpt deformers, which are sometimes referred to as custom muscles because they're pretty much behaving like a muscle system. So with the corrective joints and the Y.E.S sculpt deformers, as mentioned, they are very difficult to use for achieving complex deformation results. You would have to use a huge network of joints and also a huge network of sculpt deformers to design specific sculpt results. But the blend shapes win in this area. They are the easiest to use if you have a very complex deformation of the geometry that you want to sculpt. When it comes to the corrective joint solution and the blend shapes, they are also very easy to mirror. So if you do one side, it's very, very easy to mirror to the other side. Advanced Skeleton makes it very easy to do this, and so does the blend shape system in Maya. But with the sculpt deformers, you're going to have to set each side up separately. So that's something I have to take into consideration. Unless you use an intermediary blend shape to set up the corrective sculpt deformers, then you can have the advantage of using the mirroring function of blend shapes to mirror the results of your corrective sculpt deformer. Now, one area that the corrective sculpt deformer shines is how much better of a job it does at persistently holding volume. So when you have a corrective sculpt deformer, no matter how you pose the rig, once you trigger it, it is going to unravel whatever skinning you have to achieve the shape you want it to create. This is not the same for corrective joints. The corrective joints rely on skinning to do corrective deformation. So in some instances, they will compete with your main skinning to achieve what they were intended to do. If you set these really extreme poses, you'll find that your corrective joint system might have a problem triggering the shape that you want because you have contorted the character into a pose that makes it very difficult for it to do so. It's the main skinning competing against the skinning of the corrective joint, and sometimes the corrective joint will not come out on top. But this behavior, by the way, is understandable because, again, the corrective joints are using skinning to deform the mesh. They will, in fact, actually alter your main skinning unless you use the multi-cluster skinning approach, which sort of puts the skinning of the corrective joint on its own layer. You're also going to run into the same issue with blend shapes. Sometimes, even when they're triggered, they'll have a very difficult time competing with your main skinning if your character is in a very extreme pose. And once again, this would rarely ever happen. It will actually never happen with corrective sculpt deformers. They're more persistent. And lastly, this is what I just discussed above about using the multi-skin cluster. If you create your corrective joints without the multi-skin cluster, it will alter your main skinning. So your vertices are going to have to be reassigned to this corrective joint. And therefore, I classify this as a more destructive method because it is messing up your main skinning to make the corrective joint work. Blend shapes are non-destructive, so they will not mess around with your main skinning in any way. And so are sculpt deformers or custom muscle systems. They will not mess around with the foundational skinning. All the choices I'm about to make for corrective deformation in this course are going to be specific to Kiwa's body type. Kiwa is not particularly muscular. She is fairly lean. Most of her body fat is in her pelvic and thigh region. Her legs are also well built, but not overly defined. Her neck is so small and her head is so big that there's no need to emphasize the muscles in her neck when her head turns. Her upper torso and arms are even lacking more musculature than the rest of her body. So corrective deformation for her biceps, triceps, deltoids, pectoralis, and back muscles will be lightweight solutions that trigger minimal movement in those areas. All this will not be the case when I start rigging a male character like Bugsy. His upper torso will require more detailed corrective deformation to simulate various muscles activating and deactivating as he moves. Even with a female character like Big SNO, which I'll be rigging alongside Bugsy, there might be more detailed corrective deformation required in specific areas because she's a larger or a massier character. All right, so in spite of what option or combination of options one chooses to go with when it comes to corrective deformation, proper weight painting at the skinning stage has to be done before the corrective deformation process can commence. There are a lot of deformation issues that can be easily resolved with good weight painting at the skinning stage. So let's commence with the skinning and weight painting of her body.